Welcome to another Oblivion Corner photo walk, this time with the Fujifilm X-T4. It is a somewhat rainy and low light outing. Let's go ahead and take a look. All photos today were shot in RAW format and then developed on the computer. And they were processed in Fujifilm X-RAW Studio, except for the last one in the set, which I'll go into some more detail at the end. I went out very early in the morning because I wanted to do some low-light shooting in a quiet area of the city. The photos were generally shot wide open, so at f2 or close to that, with the shutter speeds going as low as 1/10 of a second in some cases. Now, I was able to shoot at such low speeds thanks to the IBIS taking the wheel. ISO was another story. I was cranking it as high as 2500 in some cases. When I brought the RAW files into X-RAW Studio, my goal was to push the exposure, correct the white balance, and apply appropriate film simulations based on each scene. Let's take these garbage trucks coming right up. I shot them on the spot, and since the subjects were in motion, as opposed to the other shots which were primarily stationary, IBIS wasn't going to be much help. In X-RAW Studio, instead of trying to clean things up, I went further in the opposite direction, blowing out the highlights and adding grain, because I felt it enhanced what was already there. Now, I only got the X-T4 recently, but I'm pretty happy with the photos I'm getting out of it. Compared to the Canon EOS 700D, the Rebel T5i, as it's known in the States, and also the Fujifilm X-E2, which I have shot with previously, I'm very pleased with how far I can push the pictures with the Fujifilm X-T4, as well as the added Eterna and classic negative film simulations that are available specifically on this camera. In addition to shooting in low light, this photo walk did put the Fujifilm X-T4, as well as the lens I used, the Fujinon 23mm f2, to the test when it came to weather resistance. It did rain. It wasn't super heavy rain, so I only broke out the umbrella later on in the walk, more for my own comfort than anything else really, I'm happy to report. I definitely have a soft spot for the classic negative film simulation, but it wasn't necessarily the best option in every situation I was shooting in. At least, not necessarily as is. But I have to say that there is a fine balance between applying a film simulation and accepting the look, or tweaking the heck out of a photo to the point that you essentially negate the character of the film sim that you want to use. In previous photo walks with the X-T4, I've shot straight out of camera JPEG, So this is the first time I'm shooting RAW. Exclusively, that is. I have to say, I like the workflow with XRAW Studio, which is basically a software or computer-based interface for the image quality settings on the Fujifilm X-T4 itself. It was very easy to try out different exposure and white balance options before developing the RAW files into JPEG. I have to say that I was quite pleased with how I was able to correct color casts from the street lighting effectively with a combo of color temperature and color shift adjustments after the fact. The 23mm f2 Fujinon XF lens works well with the Fujifilm X-T4. I found it to be a fast focuser and generally accurate at nailing critical focus, with only one misfire in all the photos I took during this walk, and that could realistically have been down to user error on my part, aside from the fact that these are low light and, not the easiest conditions to shoot in. The only downside to the lens is when you get close to a subject, it does lose some of its sharpness when you get to the minimum focusing distance, or close to the minimum focusing distance. For me, it's not a huge issue, because I rarely do, and additionally, since I'm not shooting professionally, I find the sharpness drop-off somewhat charming at that close distance in a lens that is otherwise, it could be said, slightly clinical to a certain degree. However, when it comes to cropping or zooming into the photos I take, I find that there is plenty of detail to go around, which is great since I chose to go with this prime instead of the zooms that Fujifilm bundles with its cameras. Being able to crop and still retain detail opens up some decent reframing possibilities for me, and justifies this choice to go rather with a more compact, maybe better performing prime lens rather than the more versatile zoom. In fact, the next photo I took is the one which came out a bit soft, relatively speaking. Either the camera missed focus or I didn't put the focus box in the right area. However, I still like the look of it, since it is reminiscent of an old film still from a hypothetical experimental movie. So I decided to accentuate this mysterious feeling by pushing the exposure up a fair bit, and I think I used the classic chrome film simulation. This next shot shows why I like this setup so much. In spite of the rain, I was still able to take photos, thanks to the weather resistance. That said, I wouldn't put this camera and lens through a blizzard willingly. And with the flexibility of shooting RAW, I was able to correct the color cast from the street lamps, boost the exposure a bit, and still get some of that classic neg goodness Now there were a number of pictures I took on this photo walk without the action cam running, so I'll go ahead and show those now, and I'll cap it all off with the final Vista, which proved to be tricky but also very rewarding to process. With this last picture, I really like how the sky came out, but the highway lights are a bit too warm and intense for the overall composition. Now, X-Raw Studio is great for treating the whole picture, but here I need more of a strategy. So I brought this picture into Capture One and used adjustment gradients, one for the sky and one for the bottom half, to intensify and tone down different parts of the image accordingly. Thank you so much for watching this far. Until next time, have a good one.